Hi, and welcome back. My name is TJ Kopcha, and I'm going to be talking to you today about needs assessment. Note that written transcripts of the video presentation are contained in the notes section of the PowerPoint document for the presentation. What is instructional design? Yeah, we talked about that last time. Let's revisit this for a moment. What is instructional design? Well, from our readings and our discussion, we learned that this is a learner-focused process that creates consistency and quality in our process of instructional design and the creation of instruction. Now, of course, there's a secret to making this happen, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't be a whole course on instructional design and a whole field dedicated to it. And so you've got to be wondering, well, what's the secret? That is what the focus of this presentation is all about. Let's take a minute to situate ourselves on the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp circles here, right? It's early in our design process, so we're at where 12 o'clock would be if this were a clock, right about here, instructional problems. As a reminder, we move clockwise through the model. Oops. There we go, we move clockwise through the model. So you're probably just starting to determine what your instructional problem is. And resolving that problem is going to become your instructional goal. From there, you'll start to explore learner characteristics. You'll start analyzing the major tasks or tasks involved in resolving your problem, and really that would lead to achieving your goal. That's really where we're headed. And so the needs assessment is a big part of that. You'll find that there are many writings about conducting a needs assessment, but they all boil down to similar themes. In essence, you're concerned with the 4 P's that are noted here: the problem, the people involved, the places involved, and the desired performance. Right? The problem. Do you really have an instructional problem? And if so, what's the true nature of it? The people. Who's involved with this problem? And what do they think about it? Places. How does the environment impact your potential solution or the problem itself? In performance, what performance or outcome is expected? Some authors and scholars separate the needs assessment from the analysis of the people involved. That is, the learners, the environment, and the task. But personally, I found this to be a hard separation to make. More often than not, needs emerge simultaneously as you begin to explore each of these areas. Let me give you an example that will shed some light on the idea of how all 4 of these P's can emerge at the same time. Yes, that says Limp Fries. Imagine, Jack in the Box comes to you. Jack in the Box is a major fast food chain on the West Coast, and actually in a lot of the West. So imagine they come to you as an instructional designer, right? The manager of the local restaurant has noticed that his customers are not satisfied with the quality of French fries. They're often limped and undercooked or overcooked and discarded as waste. The manager wants you to develop instruction that will correct this problem and result in better quality fries. Awesome, right? So you immediately start thinking, what might be the cause of these problems? How can instruction help? Right? It's not hard for you to envision a course where instruction would correct this issue, right? Take a minute and think about it. What would you do if you were the designer and you went and designed instruction? What would that instruction look like? I'm sure you can think of that. It's easy money. It's not difficult to imagine a sequence of instruction that might show workers the process of cooking fries, what good fries look like, how to cook them, maybe some expertise from someone who's had experience cooking fries about what to look for, what to watch out for, that sort of thing. Awesome, easy money. We're going to make this instruction. Then you start thinking, wait a second, not so fast. The problem seems to be pretty clear to the manager, and the solution seems pretty clear to the manager too. We need new instruction. But what about the people involved? You start to wonder, haven't they already had training on how to cook fries? Why do we need to do it again? Is there something about the environment that might be causing this issue? You know, what do they think the problem is? I know what the manager thinks the problem is, and I know what solution he thinks. Can you think of some reasons why the fries might not be cooked properly that has nothing to do with instruction? Take a minute right now, see what you can think of. If you want to pause it before going on, go ahead, but I'm about to advance here. All right, so you've got a hint here, right? Did you get it? Did you nail it? Yeah, see, you come to find out, you start talking to some of the people who work there, and you come to find out that the people who cook the fries, they were trained. They had extensive training on cooking the fries. But there are two major issues causing the problem, and neither ended up being about instruction. First, the timer that times the fries had been broken for weeks. They'd been requesting a new one, but it just hadn't come in yet. And so they were cooking the fries by sight, trying to create their own timing scheme. The result? Overcooked and undercooked fries. So now that you know this bit of information, you say to the manager, yeah, I'm going to take your $10,000 to develop your instruction. And then you start by saying, the first thing you have to do is fix the timer. And then you also decide, I'm going to develop a poster, and this poster is going to contain various shades of cooked fries, from severely undercooked to severely overcooked. Right? That way you can train people to not only rely on the timer, but to have a much better way of judging by sight whether the fries are done, and they can recognize properly cooked fries from the poster in the cooking area. Problems resolved in less than a week, you earned your 10 grand. Now, just a couple things to say about this example. I'm pretty sure it's based in reality. I believe that the timer part of it was true. The poster part of it I added myself, but it's based in reality. When I lived in California, I used to go to a place called Brugger's Bagels all the time. As good as, if not better than, like an Einstein Bagels or a place like that. And on the wall, they had a chart that showed you from very light brown all the way to dark brown bagels, so that their workers could tell by sight whether the bagels were done or not. Pretty ingenious. What's the point here? The point is that there are lots of non-instructional problems in our lives, right? Someone comes to you and says the teachers aren't using new software regularly, and they must need more training because they don't know what to do. But then you go and you ask the teachers, and it turns out the software is glitchy and it only works every third time they try and boot it up, so they just stopped using it. They're frustrated. The problem's not instructional, it's environmental. Right? I think I had one more there. Hold on. Oh, so yeah, it doesn't take much to imagine that an employee, even a teacher, but an employee somewhere, is taking too long to complete a work order request. Someone decides they need training to speed that up. So you start investigating. You start asking around. It turns out that those work order requests, they still haven't been converted to digital format yet. That's not good. It takes the process 3 times as long. So when an employee wants to complete one, they first have to go get a blank copy from an administrator, copy it, fill it out by hand, make a copy again, and then submit it. Then they have to fix anything that's not legible. So if you can imagine in an environment like that, it's the environment that's creating the problem and holds the solution, and not instruction in and of itself. See, your job here is to find an instructional problem. Now that you know that not all problems are instructional, your job is to find one that is instructional. And notice my tip. You need to find a problem where the cause is primarily a lack of knowledge or skill. Now, you may work in a place where not only do you find that you need training, but you also can alter the environment, and that's an okay project. But I want you to make sure you've got a project idea here that is an instructional problem in some way, shape, or form. And that's what the needs assessment is for. When you're conducting the needs assessment, you're trying to find out the root of the problem. Is it really a lack of knowledge and skills? Like I said with the French fries. These employees had training previously on how to make fries. Every new employee goes through a round of training on how to make fries. So right off the bat, that's a clue. Maybe it's not that they don't know how, but something is preventing them from doing a good job. If they really lack knowledge and skills, to what degree? Do they just need a refresher course? Do they need a job aid, a poster that shows them what well-cooked fries look like and that sort of thing? Could it be environmental and knowledge and skills? It could be. So to what degree is the environment the problem, and to what degree are knowledge and skills the issue? You find this out by talking to people. People will tell you what they think the problem is. People will show you if you observe them in action. Watch them in their environment, right? The place will tell you what the problem is if you watch people functioning within it. And that's where performance comes in. Watch the functions. Go watch somebody who can do the job successfully. Break it down and find out how they're doing it successfully, and then try and reproduce that for people who are struggling. All right? All this information will help you in deciding whether to design instruction or whether you need some other kind of an intervention, and determining what the instruction or the intervention should look like. So there's some major components to your analysis, and one of them is your potential audience, right? Why do it? You're trying to identify, in addition to figuring out whether you have an instructional problem, if you think you're going to give some instruction, you need to know what characteristics the learners have that you're going to need to take account of when you're designing or delivering your course. If you develop a mobile-based solution, you're going to develop an app or a web-based solution for a mobile device, and then you find out only half of the people who are going to take your instruction might have access to a mobile device, that's not a good solution. If you find out that the people who you're going to be developing instruction for have already had training and the training didn't work, don't reproduce the training in its original form. So if their original training was a face-to-face training that involved print-based materials, you might not want to do that again. You might want to have an on-the-job training, or you might want to create some mobile assets that they can carry with them on the job so that they can do their job better instead of trying to retain it from a face-to-face environment and then carry it into their work environment. So what does an audience analysis look like? There's lots of ways of doing it. This next slide is just going to show you a potential sequence that you might take and things you might want to find out. Who is going to take your class? How many of them are there? Where will they be situated when they're taking your instruction? And when they're doing the performance that you want them to do, because both of those are potential areas now to interject instruction. What kind of prior knowledge do they have? What other factors might impede their learning? So not only can your audience tell you what they think a problem might be, you also need to know a lot about who they are and what their demographics look like so that you can develop your instruction properly. Same thing with the environment. The environment can tell you what the root of a problem is, but you also have to look at the environment to figure out what you can and can't do with your instruction. You need to identify the characteristics of an environment that you need to account for when you're designing and delivering your instructional product. I'm going to give you a classic example, and I've seen this quite a few times. So students from the University of Georgia will plan to go into a K-12 classroom to do something really fun and exciting. A most recent example is Club Penguin. One of our students wanted to go into a school and have the kids at the school play Club Penguin so that she could figure out what kind of learning was happening while she was in there. So she gets the whole thing set up. She goes through the IRB process. She goes down to the school site to set it up. It turns out that, maybe you can guess what happened next, the school's firewall blocked Club Penguin and they couldn't get past it. All that hard work and effort to be stopped right there because of a little environmental issue. So knowing your environment up front is really important in helping determine what your instruction might look like. I'm going to give you another classic example. Many times we plan on having video assets as part of our instruction, but we forget to check the bandwidth capabilities at the school site or other site where the instruction is going to take place, and that can be a huge factor. Um, you know, here you are, and you're testing a video, and you think this is going to be great. Kids are going to download a video, and they're going to watch the video, and they're going to do something. And then come to find out, that works when one device is downloading the video. But what happens when 20 devices are downloading the same video simultaneously? A lot of times you'll see a huge dip in performance in your internet and the bandwidth, because of the bandwidth, and it's an issue that you can sort of head off at the pass if you have it on your mind ahead of time to think about it. So those are some things to think about, right? If you're going to use computers, what does that access look like? Is there learning software available, and what does it look like? Bandwidth is a big one. Support tools available, what do they look like? What kind of time is realistically available for instruction, and how can you make the best use of it? What do your stakeholders think about this? What do your learners think about it? And there might even be some other factors that we haven't talked about, but this should stimulate some thinking for you, because you're about to head out and do your own brief needs assessment. And then finally, function analysis. If somebody could do this job really well, what would it look like? Because if you know the ideal of what something should be, and you know where it is right now, you can do what Rossett said. You can figure out where the gap is, and you can try and narrow the gap. Right? So go out, identify the key knowledge, skills, tasks, and behaviors, the job functions that a learner should be able to perform after completing your instructional product or achieving whatever instructional goal you have. Now, it says function analysis here, but really this is task analysis, which was part of some of what you read. The goal is still the same. If there was a right way to do something, break it down and figure out how to put it into chunks so that a novice could do that like an expert might. And here's how you might do it. You might read about it. You might look at how other experts in the world are doing it. Let's say you're a library media specialist and you're about to talk to a bunch of teachers about technology integration. How would you go find out about what good technology integration looks like? You could go online. You could go to edutopia.org. You could go to Free Technology for Teachers. You could go to a lot of the sites that are out there that are readily available that set a vision for what the ideal technology integration looks like. You could review evaluation data to find out where people are now and how far they are from the ideal, or benchmarks. You can observe somebody who is doing a good job integrating technology. You could survey teachers so that more broadly you could see how all the teachers are feeling and doing with technology integration. Interview people who have done instruction on technology integration before. Interview learners who have had instruction on it and who haven't. Right? So there's lots of ways to get this information. There's a couple rules of thumb, though. I don't want you to start getting overwhelmed, so I'm going to try and pull it all together here for you. As you're thinking through your project and what you might potentially create or do for instruction, if there's something that you want to know and you don't know it, ask. It's really, really better to ask now and find out the answer, even if it's a disappointing answer, than to get it later after you've spent all this time designing instruction. My friend Frank Wynn, and actually if you look at the bottom of the slide, it says FN, and he started by developing these slides back when we worked together at San Diego State, and so I've taken them and I've used some and I've modified some and that sort of thing, but we went to grad school together. Great guy, really just enjoy talking to him about design and life in general. But he has this great saying, garbage in, garbage out, when it comes to instructional design, and it's really true. The better the information is at the onset, the better a product you'll be able to create. And that's why if you ask someone and they don't know, then go ask someone else. This isn't a game that we're playing like, well, I asked and they didn't know. That doesn't absolve you. It doesn't mean the problem doesn't still exist. It just means that person wasn't the right person to talk to. Now, with that being said, time is of the essence. So do legwork, but be resourceful. Try and pick people strategically to talk to so that you don't have to interview 15 people. This isn't a research study. You're not trying to show that you got good coverage of a topic. You want the right people to give you the information that you're looking for, not just everyone. So be efficient. Just get the information that's relevant, right? And then finally, avoid something called analysis paralysis. Sometimes it can be really fun to just hang around and talk to people about the problem. You can get stuck in that mode. You can get paralyzed by trying to find out all the little details about the problem. I would highly recommend that you try and avoid that at all costs. It's not good use of your time. You want information about the problem as you see it. And as you get that information, you might modify the way you're looking at the problem, or it might confirm the way you're looking at the problem. When you feel like you've got a really good indication that you're seeing what you think you're seeing, you can move on. Okay? How do you get this data? This is like a Browning quote. Let me count the ways. There's so many different ways to get this data. You could do a focus group, you could do interviews, you could observe, you could do surveys, you could do all kinds of stuff. If you look at the requirements for your own needs assessment, interviews are a minimum. I do recommend, though, if it's possible, do a brief survey and get a little bit broader perspective on it in addition to the interviews or observations. But triangulating your data is important. I know I just said earlier it's not about getting a breadth of people. You're not doing research, but at the same time, you do want to make sure that you've got a good sense of what's happening, not only from particular people, but across people too. So if it's possible to survey, then do it, or focus group. They don't have to be lengthy. You can be very targeted and to the point and just say, hey, I see this problem. Do you see it too? That kind of thing. So we're going to learn more about the instructional design process as the course moves forward. But for now, begin by thinking about the steps in this model a little bit more, right? Like I said in my last presentation, like most things in life, good instructional design starts with a problem. And so figuring out whether you have a problem and what the true nature of the problem is really the first goal of a needs assessment. When you read Alison Rossett, her take on needs assessment sort of blends the next two steps. You're talking to people for a variety of reasons to find out their take on the problem to begin with, to find out what they think a solution might be, but really to find out what the gap is between the ideal and the reality. And it's the same thing with the task analysis or the function analysis. What would be ideal? What do we have right now? And how far apart are those two things? Generally, good instructional design has a clear path from the where we are now to the ideal, or it makes a really good case for why the ideal may not be possible right now, and what is the next possible step, and how does my instruction get me there? Okay, so yeah, we're going to be covering, if it hasn't been clear, we're going to be covering pretty much the first quarter of our clock here, from 12 noon to 3 o'clock. And that's where we're at. We're moving from problems to analysis, and that's what IDA 1 is all about. Instructional design begins with the problem. So what are you going to submit to me when this is all said and done? You're going to submit a summary of your analysis of an instructional problem from your own professional context. It needs to include these three things: a clear statement of the problem you've identified, include some context and background from which it originates. Next, describe your understanding of these specific analyses: audience, environment, and task. What are you finding out about these things? and then clearly state the primary need or needs that your instruction would address. And if you go to that IDA, underneath it, it says how to actually go about doing it. I highly recommend interviews at a minimum. Go interview at least one or two other people, a potential audience member and that sort of thing, but people who can tell you about their needs, what's going on in the environment, and then maybe even someone who can show you what the ideal might be in a task function. There's a caveat to this that I want to throw out there. You might actually be the expert from whom you draw that expert task analysis from, or that function analysis. So you might be the model in your school of a technology integrator. You might be the model of someone who does project-based learning, and that's fine. That's actually encouraged. From me, it's encouraged in this class, because having that level of expertise, being your own subject matter expert, it cuts down on a lot of the complications involved. Now, that being said, even if you think of yourself as an expert in what you're trying to accomplish, if you could find somebody else in our class, or somebody around you who also feels like they have that expertise, talk to them too. Perspective is really powerful. I just can't tell you how powerful it is to have a few different perspectives on something when you're in the initial stages of design. It's helpful. You start thinking of things that you just didn't even think were relevant to begin with, and it can be very, very powerful. All right. This PowerPoint is available to you for download. I encourage you to do that, because not only did it list for you, I'm going to go to a slide here. Not only did it list for you some of the things to think about with audience analysis, and then environmental analysis, and then of course task analysis, but that's not all. It also showed you those things to look for, how to get the data, right? Ways to think about getting the data. Okay. Alison Rossit's article is an excellent resource as well. So please make sure that you've read that if you haven't read it already. And that brings me to my disclaimer here. I'm not attempting to cover the readings in their entirety. I'm attempting to fill them out a little bit and give some perspective and give some examples here. So come to class with questions. Come to class ready to talk about this. Come to class hopefully excited. There's a lot of power in this process, especially because it originates from gaining so much knowledge right up at the forefront about the true nature of the problem that you're trying to address. That really does give you some authority that sometimes we're lacking when we just create instruction because somebody else said that that's what we needed to do. So, okay, hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and I will see you soon.